Good morning and welcome to our Monday Bible study. Today we are in our last session of the life of David in 2 Samuel. And for anybody that's read ahead, you realize that David still is alive at the end of 2 Samuel, and you really have to read the first two chapters of Kings to find out what happens to him at the end. All I'll say about that is he dies of an old age. But there are some interesting things in 1st and 2nd Kings that we'll talk about maybe in the fall. But today we want to finish up. We're in chapter 19, and we ended last week with David hearing that his son Absalom, who essentially had a rebellion against his father, tried to seize the throne, took Jerusalem. David had to leave, and then eventually there was a fight, and his commander of his armies, Joab, kills him, even though he's been given strict orders not to. Word gets back that he is dead, and David begins to weep. In that moment, we see a father who both the political reality and his internal reality are at odds. As a father, he weeps for a son. Part of what he probably weeps for is looking backwards and saying, it didn't have to go this way. If I'd have been a better father, maybe my son wouldn't be dead. We look back through the story and we see where David has made mistakes. Absalom wanted to come back to Jerusalem after he killed his brother, and it took a while. David finally lets him come back, but then just kind of ignores him for 2 years. And during that period, more animosity grows. But Absalom is dead, and David is weeping. It was told Joab, the king is weeping, verse 1 of 19, and mourning for Absalom. So the victory of the day has turned into mourning for all the troops, and the troops heard that day. The king is grieving for his son. The troops stole into the city that day as soldiers steal in, who are ashamed when they flee into battle. The king covered his face. The king cried with a loud voice, "My son Absalom, my son Absalom, my son." Then Joab came into the house to the king and said, "Today you have covered with shame the faces of all your officers who saved your life today, and the lives of your sons and your daughters, the lives of your wives and your concubines, for love of those who hate you, and for hatred for those who love you." Joab comes to him and says, "You are mourning the loss of your son, who is an enemy to you. And in doing so, you are negating the feelings and the responsibility of those who have fought for you. And it's almost as though you love your enemy and hate the ones that what? Are here right next to you." I mean, just imagine the king won't come out after he's been given victory because he's mourning the one who's inflicted harm. And for us, we know that David loves his son. And he's put in a very hard situation here. As we think about how hard of a situation it could be, this is a very hard one. You know, the person that you loved was the person that betrayed you multiple times. And even though they were your enemy, you still loved them. But for the politics of it, it looks bad. And Joab is always about the politics of the situation. "You made it clear today that commanders and officers are nothing to you, for I perceive that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead today, then you would be pleased. So go out at once and speak kindly to your servants, for I swear by the Lord, if you do not go, not a man will stay with you this night. And this will be worse for you than any disaster that has come upon you from your youth until now." Then the king got up and took his seat at the gate, and the troops were told, "See, the king is sitting at the gate," and all the troops came before the king. Now Joab has killed several people that he shouldn't have killed in the story of 1st and 2nd Samuel. He kills Absalom. Now we're not going to get to chapters 1 and 2 of 1 Kings, but at the end of David's life, He's going to tell Solomon, you need to get rid of him. And part of it is, I think, David holds this against him. You know what? In my lifetime, I'm not going to take revenge on you. Because over and over again, we've seen David want to keep his hands clean. But he holds this against Joab. He holds several things, but this, I think, specifically. Meanwhile, all the Israelites had fled to their homes, and the people were disputing through all the tribes of Israel, saying, the king delivered us from the hand of our enemies, saved us from the hand of the Philistines. Now he has fled out of the land because of Absalom. But Absalom, whom we anointed over us, is dead in battle. Now, therefore, why do you say nothing about bringing the king back? Now, what we'll notice is the people that have stuck with David are most of the people from the tribe of Judah. And we saw Absalom picked a lot of the northern kingdoms, those other kingdoms. You know, there's 12 tribes. 11 tribes are active. One tribe is the Levites. They don't hold any land, and they aren't noticed in any of the discussions. So essentially, 10 tribes were with Absalom. Judah remained constant. And what we'll see in just the next few verses, the tension between the northern tribes and the southern tribe of Judah start to escalate here, and by the time Solomon's gone, it'll blow up. And that's where you have a divided kingdom. But you already see the roots of that division already within 1 and 2 Samuel, especially here. There's already a division between the southern tribe of Judah and those northern tribes. David sent messengers to the priests Zadok and Abner. Remember, they were the ones back in Jerusalem that were spies. Say to the elders of Judah, why should you be the last to bring the king back to his house? Take all Israel. The talk of all Israel has come to the king. You are my kin, you are my bone and my flesh. Why then should you be the last to bring back the king? And say to Amash, are you not my bone and my flesh? So may God do to me and more if you are not the commander of my army from now on in the place of Joab. So Amash swayed the hearts of all the people of Judah as one, and they sent word to the king. So Amash served under Absalom. David essentially gives him commander of the army over Joab, which is weird, but also kind of a sense of, Joab, you've displeased me by killing my son. So he makes Absalom's commander his commander and is telling everybody, is it time to come back? Return both you and all your servants. So the king came back to Jerusalem, and Judah came to Gilgal to meet the king and to bring him over the Jordan. So the king is being ushered back into Jerusalem across the Jordan. And what we'll see over the next couple of verses is some of the people that opposed him or perceived to oppose him when he was leaving Jerusalem because he was being chased by Absalom, now come back to greet him to see if they can find favor in him. Remember Shimei from our last week, he's the one cursing and throwing stones, saying that he held the guilt over Saul's family. Shimei, son of Gera the Benjaminite from Bahurim, hurried to come down with the people of Judah to meet King David. With him were 1,000 people from Benjamin. So he brings part of his tribe out. And Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, with 15 sons and his 20 servants, rushed down to the Jordan ahead of the king. While crossing, they were taking place to bring us over to the king's household and to do his pleasure. So they rush out to meet him before he gets to Jerusalem, before he gets back to the throne, before he can make any edicts and decisions about what's going to happen to them. Shimei, son of Gera, fell down before the king as he was about to cross the Jordan, and said to the king, may my lord not hold me guilty, or remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. May the king not bear it in mind. Now remember, David let him go because he said, if it's God's will that I'm not to be king, that's God's will. Well, David's reassured now it's God's will that he's to be king. Those curses that Shimei gave didn't come to practice. I mean, you think about the political, if you've got somebody out there cursing you and you're coming back, are you going to let them go or not? For your servant knows that I have sinned. Therefore, see, I've come this day, the first of all the people of the house of Joseph, to come down to meet the Lord the King. Abishai, son of Zeruiah, answered, Shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? But David said, What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeror, that you should today become an adversary to me? Shall anyone be put to death in Israel this day? For I do not know that I am the king over Israel. The king said to Shimei, You shall not die. And the king gave him his oath. He lets him go. He shows grace. Mephibosheth, remember Mephibosheth, one of Jonathan's sons, who David showed kindness to. He's lame in feet. Remember, the servant of Saul was told to give the land back to Jonathan, and he was to serve him. He's the one that comes out to David and gives him all the food and rations, and says, he's doing this not because of Mephibosheth, but in spite of him. He didn't show up. Well, Mephibosheth's got a different story. Mephibosheth, grandson of Saul, came down to meet the king. He had not taken care of his feet or trimmed his beard or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day came back in safety. When he came from Jerusalem to meet the king said to him, Why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth? He answered, My lord, O king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, Saddle him a donkey for me, so that I may ride on it and go with the king, for your servant is lame. He has slandered your servant to my lord the king, but my lord the king is like the angel of God. Do whatever seems good to you. For all my father's house were doomed to death before my lord the king, but you set your servant among those to eat at your table. What further right have I than to appeal to the king? And the king said to him, Why speak any more of those affairs? I have decided. You and Ziba shall divide the land. Mephibosheth said to the king, Let him take it all, since my lord the king has arrived home safely. So Ziba had come and gave a wild story. Mephibosheth says, That's not true. David doesn't know. But he's in a good mood. Just divide the land. And Mephibosheth's, No, I'll just continue to live as I have been. Now Barzillai, the Gileadite, who had come down from Rogman, went on with king to the Jordan to escort him over the Jordan. So we're introduced to him, and what we come to know is he has kind of been a patron of David as he's been kind of in exile. What we'll find later is that his son and his name will be spoken to Solomon as one to continue to keep good relationships with. So he essentially comes back with David, but gets to a point in his escort that he's going to stop. Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old. He had provided the king with food while he stayed at Manim, for he was a very wealthy man. The king said to him, Come over with me, and I will provide for you in Jerusalem at my side. You've done good to me. You come live with me now. But Barzillai said to the king, How many years have I still to live that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? Today I am 80 years old. Can I discern what is pleasant and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats or what he drinks? Can I still listen to the voice of singing and men and singing women? Why then should your servant be added to a burden to my lord the king? Your servant will go a little way over the Jordan with the king. Why should the king recompense me with such reward? He essentially plays it off. I'm an old man. What could I enjoy that you have? I can't see, I can't taste, I can't hear. It'd be a waste of your time, waste of my time for me to come. Please let your servant return, so that I may die in my own town, in the graves of my father and my mother. But here is your servant, Chimiham. Let him go over with the Lord my king, and do for him whatever seems good. And the king answered, Chimiham shall go over with me, and I'll do whatever seems good to you, and all that you desire of me I will do for you. So it's essentially probably his son goes and lives with David. And we'll see that alliance later on in 1 Kings. Then all the people crossed over the Jordan. The king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own home. The king went out to Gilgal, and Chimiham went on with him. And all the people of Judah and all the half of the people of Israel brought the king on his way. Then all the people of Israel came to the king and said, "Why have our kindred, the people of Judah, stolen you away and brought the king and his household over the Jordan and all of David's men with him?" So the tribes come together and they see that Judah has taken a very special place with David. And they're worried. And all the people of Judah answered the people of Israel, "Because the king is near of kin to us. Why then are you angry over this matter? Have we eaten at all the king's expenses, or has he given us any gift?" But the people of Israel answered the people of Judah, We have 10 shares in the king, and in David we also have more than you. Why then do you despise us? We are not the first to speak of bringing back our king, but the words of the people of Judah were fiercer than the words of the people of Israel. They essentially get in a screaming match. He's our king too. Well, he's closer to kin to us. So already the seeds within kind of this animosity, we've already seen it with some of those that after Saul dies kind of continue trying to keep the saluted kingship. Now those with David, they see a familiarity with Judah, and they're already kind of... So we see within this moment somebody who decides this is an opportune time. Now a scoundrel named Sheba, son of Berchi, a Benjaminite, happened to be there. He sounded the trumpet and cried out, "We have no portion in David, no shares in the son of Jesse. Everyone to your tent, O Israel." So all the people of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba, son of Berchi, but the people of Judah followed their king steadfastly from the Jordan to Jerusalem. So Sheba decides he's going to essentially, I'll lead the northern kingdoms, the northern tribes. We're tired of this mess. Now David has just won a victory. David has just come back to Jerusalem. And now David's already got somebody trying to have a revolt. What's David going to do? David came to the house at Jerusalem, and the king took his 10 concubines who he had left to look after the house and put them in a house under guard, provided for them, but did not go into them. So they were shut up until the day of their death, living as if in womanhood. Remember, Absalom had defiled these women. Now David can't take them back. Politics of it is just too much. So they are essentially put under house arrest and live their remaining years, essentially as widows. The king said to Amish, remember this is Absalom's commander and now his commander, "Call the men of Jordan together to me within 3 days, and be here yourself." So Amish went to summon Judah, but he delayed beyond the set time that had been appointed. And David said to Abishi, "Now Sheba, son of Berchi, will do us more harm than Absalom. Take your Lord's servants and pursue him, or he will find fortified cities for escape and escape from us." Now remember, when David left, Absalom gets wise counsel from David's former counselor. Remember his name, starts with an A, Ahithophel. And he says, pursue him quickly and get rid of him, just him and nobody else, and things will be good. Well, David essentially does that plan for Sheba. Do not let him get to a fortified city. Do not let him get to a place where he will be safe. We need to take care of him right here, right now. So he sends for Joab to do this. Joab went after him along with the Sherites and the Pelethites and all the warriors. They went from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son. And when they were at the large stones that is Gibeon, Amash came to meet them. So Amash has been out trying to get people from Judah to come and to hear from David as supporters, but he didn't get back in 3 days. Now Joab was wearing a soldier's garment, and over it a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened at the waist. And as he went forward, it fell out. He dropped it. And Joab said to Amish, "Is it well with you, my brother?" And Joab took Amish by the beard with his right hand to kiss him, but Amish did not notice the sword in Joab's hand. Joab struck him in the belly so that his entrails poured out on the ground, and he died. He did not strike a second blow. Now, we don't know what David would have done with Amish if he had gotten back. But Joab is always political. And this becomes his rival, and he gets an opportunity to meet him on the road. And when he does, he murders him. There's not a fight, it's a trick. Come here, let me see you. And then he slits him straight open. Very gruesome death. Then Joab and the brother of Abshi pursued Sheba, son of Birch. So he leaves the scene of the murder of this other commander. And one of Joab's men took his stand at Amash and said, "Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab." Amash lay wallowing in his blood on the highway, and the man saw that all the people were stopping. Since he saw that all who came by him were stopping, he carried Amash from the highway into a field and threw a garment over him. Once he was removed from the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Birchi. I mean, can you imagine? You thought this was the commander. You see him laying dead on the ground. People just stopped to see what's happened. And he says, if you're really for David, go after Joab. Don't worry about this guy anymore. Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel, to Abel, to Beth-makkah, and all the Birchites assembled and followed inside. Joab's forces came and besieged him at Abel of Beth-makkah, and they threw up a siege ramp against the city, and it stood against the rampart. Joab's forces were battling the wall to break it down. So Joab seizes this city. They put siege work around it. They're going to besiege the city to break down the walls. But a wise woman called from the city, listen, tell Joab, come here, I want to speak to you. Again, within 1st and 2nd Samuel, it is a wise woman who gives counsel to stop more bloodshed. He came near her, and the woman said, "Are you Joab?" He answered, "I am." And then she said to him, "Listen to the words of your servant." He answered, "I'm listening." She said, "They used to say in old days, 'Let them inquire at Abel,' so that they would settle a matter. I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel. You seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the heritage of the Lord?" Joab answered, "Far be it from me, far be it, that I should swallow up or destroy. That's not the case. But a man of the hill country of Ephraim called Sheba, son of Birchi, has lifted his hand up against the king David. Give him up alone, and I will withdraw the city." The woman said to Joab, "His head shall be thrown over the wall to you." Then the woman went to all the people with her wise plan. And they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Birchi, and threw it out to Joab. So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city, and all went to their homes, while Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. This wise woman understands that if Joab continues to break down the walls, the whole city will fall. There's got to be an alternative plan. The alternative plan for her is one person isn't worth the destruction of the city. So she gives up Sheba. She cuts off his head and throws it over the wall. And Joab leaves. These aren't the stories we normally tell, somebody on the road being gutted and beheading to children in children's Sunday school. But these are stories in 1st and 2nd Samuel. And what we see here is not a full-fledged kingdom with institutions, but essentially a king who rules over tribal leaders who oftentimes go into tribal war. And when you go into tribal war, you have lots of bloodshed. Now, Joab was in command of all the army of Israel. Benani, son of Jedahiah, was command of the Cherethites and Perethites, and Sheba was secretary, Zadok, so forth. So, essentially, we get to this point in the story of David continues to reign over Israel till his death. And what we have over chapters 21 and 24 are essentially kind of appendixes to 1st and 2nd Samuel of some things that have happened under David's reign that weren't a part of the narrative that God is here. They're kind of extra stories. There's some list of some of the people that would be a part of Israel's commanders and armies. So we'll kind of look over these. And there's a couple of poems at the end. So the narrative kind of stops and we get some other little things, nuggets about what happened in David's reign. And then we aren't given a clear picture of David's end until we get to 1st and 2nd Kings. And we have to remember, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings are essentially a part of one larger body of work. They all kind of flow in and out of each other. Okay. So if you read Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy is kind of the back end of the Exodus wilderness journey. And at Deuteronomy, we get to see the people of Israel given the covenant again before they go into the promised land. And then we pick up into Joshua. They go into the promised land. And then once they get there, they've got to defeat the enemies. They've got to set up their tribes. And then from there, we get to Judges. And Judges talks about the tribal Israel, its history. It talks about it did well with God and went away from God, and God brought up Judges. And then from Judges, we got to 1st and 2nd Samuel, where we go from Judges to the prophet Samuel, who's kind of in between judge and prophet, to the kingship of Saul and David. And then from 1st and 2nd Kings, we'll see how the kingdom goes from a unified kingdom under Solomon to a divided kingdom of Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And then Israel gets demolished by the Assyrians, and by the end of 2nd Kings, Babylon comes, and they go into exile. And all of this kind of tells the history of Israel from the wilderness to exile. And the redactors, those that came alongside and compiled all of these things together, it gives us kind of, it's not as unified as all the way, but it's as unified as you're going to get in the Old Testament of a continual story from Deuteronomy to the end of 2nd Kings. You've also got Chronicles, which kind of comes alongside and tells the same story in a different way, but it's from a different perspective. So the Deuteronomistic history is essentially the history. It starts in Deuteronomy, goes to Deuteronomy, to Joshua, to Judges, to 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. So it's kind of a unified historical perspective of the history of Israel that probably comes out of exile. When they're in exile, as they come back from exile, how do we remember our story? How do we tell what has happened? How did we get here? And part of that is taking those oral traditions and beginning to write them down for the first time. So here are some extra stories that we have. We'll just kind of skim these as we have time. Now there was famine in the days of David for 3 years. Year after year, David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord said, "There is blood guilt on Saul and all of his house." So this is a unique story because we think we would have heard this story somewhere else. It's kind of a gruesome story. But there's famine in the land, and he inquires of God, and God says, there's blood guilt still on Saul and Saul's household. So the king called the Gibeonites and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not people of Israel, but a remnant of the Amorites. Although the people of Israel had sworn to spare them, Saul had tried to wipe them out in his zeal for the people of Israel and Judah. So we're introduced to this group of people to which Saul tried to essentially eradicate. And David goes to them. And David said to the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you? How shall I make expiation, that you may bless the heritage of the Lord? The blood guilt on Saul must be on you guys. So what can I do to help expiate, to get rid of this blood guilt?" And Gibeonite said, "It is not a matter of silver or gold between us and the house of Saul or his house. Neither is it for us to put anyone to death in Israel." He said, "What do you say that I should do for you?" And they said to the king, "The man who consumed us and planned to destroy us, so that we should have no place in all the territory of Israel. Let 7 of his sons be handed over to us, and we will impale them before the Lord at Gibeon on the mountain of the Lord. And the king said, I will hand them over. So we know that David has pledged to Saul and to Jonathan that he will keep his household up. These 7 sons might want to be king one day. It's very easy that the Gibeonites said, hey, you just bring them to us, we'll impale them. We'll get rid of them. So it's kind of one of those appendix stories that doesn't necessarily fit within the narrative, but they've kept it to say, this is what David did to get rid of. David keeps his hands clean by letting them do it. Over and over again, David will keep his hands clean. But the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Saul's Jonathan, because of the oath the Lord had between David and Jonathan. So David remembers his oath. He keeps one son. Which one? The lame one. The king took 2 sons of Ripha, daughter of Aiah, who were born to Saul, Amri, and Mephibosheth, and 5 sons of Maria, daughter of Saul, who were born. He gave them into the hands of the Gibeonites, and they impaled them on the mountain before the Lord. The 7 of them perished together. They were put to death in the first days of the harvest, at the beginning of barley harvest. And then Rezah, the daughter of Aiah, took sackcloth and spread it on a rock for herself, from the beginning of harvest until the rain fell on them from the heavens. She did not allow the birds of the air to come on the bodies by day, or the wild animals by night. When David was told that Rezah, daughter of Aiah, the concubine of Saul, had done, David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of son of Jonathan from all the people of Japhs-Gilgal, who had stole them from the public square of Bethmith, where the Philistines had hung them up on the day the Philistines killed Saul of Gilboa. And he brought them up from there, the bones of Saul, the bones of Jonathan, and gathered the bones of those who had been impaled. And they buried the bones of Saul, his son Jonathan, in the land of Benjamin, in the tomb which was his father Kish. And they did all that the king commanded. After that, God had heeded supplications for the land. So the land's clean now. We get some stories here. The Philistines went to war again with Israel. David went down together with his servants. They fought against the Philistines. David grew weary. Ishabethbal, one of the descendants of the giants, whose spear weighed 300 shekels of bronze, who was fitted out with new weapons, said he would kill David. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came to his aid and attacked the Philistines and killed him. Then David's men swore to him, you shall not go out with us to battle any longer, so that you do not quench the lamp of Israel. So David's getting older. The men are worried. He doesn't need to be out in battle. People are trying to get him. After this battle took place, the Philistines at Gob, there was another descendant of the giants. There was another battle with the Philistines at Gob. So you got a little bit more stories here of adventure and war. In chapter 22, we have a very long psalm of praise, which is essentially the same as Psalm 18. So if you were to take Psalm 18 and take this psalm, they're both psalms of praise from David. And in the psalms, we see several kind of themes come along. We see themes of kingship. We see themes of God's handwork in David's life. So we'll read over that quickly. David spoke to the Lord the words of the song on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all of his enemies, from the hand of Saul. So it goes backwards in time. This tells us of a psalm that David essentially wrote after Saul's hand is no longer at him. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and horn of my salvation, my stronghold, my refuge, my Savior. You save me from violence. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I have saved from my enemies. For the waves of death encompassed me, the torrents of perdition assailed me, the cords of Sheol entangled me, the snares of death confronted me. In my distress I called upon the Lord. To my God I called. For his temple he heard my voice, and my cry came to his ears. Then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundations of heaven trembled and quaked because he was angry. Smoke went out from his nostrils, and devouring fire from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. He bowed the heavens and came down. His darkness was under his feet. He rode on cherubim and flew. He was upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness around him a canopy, thick clouds gathering of water. Out of the brightness before him coals of fire flamed forth. The Lord thundered from heaven. The Most High uttered his voice. I'm going to let y'all finish reading. It's a very long song. But it ends in verse 47 and following. The Lord lives. Blessed be my rock, and exalted be my God, the rock of my salvation. God gave me vengeance and brought down peoples under me. He brought me out from my enemies. You exalted my head above adversaries. You delivered me from the violent. For this I will extol you, O Lord, among the nations, and sing praises to your name. He is a tower of salvation for his king, that shows steadfast love to his anointed, to David, and is steadfast forever. So as you go back and read the Psalms attributed to David, remember some of the stories we've read. Remember stories of distress. Remember stories of sin that David has done. Remember when David is essentially being attacked on all sides. By his family, by those that would go after him. And you can read the Psalms hopefully with a new sense of awareness of where is David coming from in these moments. 23, we get the last words of David. Although you'll see more of David's story in 1 Kings chapter 1 and 2. Now these were the last words of David. The oracle of David, son of Jesse, the oracle of the man whom God exalted, the anointed one of God of Jacob, the favorite of the strong one of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord speaks through me. His word is upon my tongue. The God of Israel has spoken. The rock of Israel has said to me, one who rules over people justly, ruling in the fear of God, is like the light of a morning, like the sun rising on cloudless morning, gleaming from the rain on the grassy land. Is not my house like this was with God? For he has made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered in all things and secure. He will not cause to prosper all my help and my desire. But the godless are like the thorns that are thrown away, for they cannot be picked up with the hand, to touch the one who uses an iron bar or a shaft of the spear, and they are entirely consumed in fire on the spot. So we get some last words of David here, praising God for helping him. He also kind of, at the end, remembers fondly all of the good he has done, and looks at all the people that have done wrong to him. We get a little bit of mention of David's heroes in verses 8 through 39. I'm not going to read those, but you can go back and read. There are some just small little stories about some of the heroes that served under David, those that killed lots of men, those that just very quick little stories. Y'all can read those as you go along. And we're going to get to chapter 24, which is a curious story, and that will be where we end today. So, this story is also mentioned in Chronicles, and we're not going to go over it. It's in 1 Chronicles 21. And as we read it, I want us to ask the question, why does God get upset?
People disobey him.
Again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, go count the people of Israel and Judah. Now, if you read 1 Chronicles, the blame for the census count isn't God. Let's look over at 1 Chronicles just real quickly. So, in 1 Chronicles chapter 21. Chapter 21 of 1 Chronicles retells this same story. Satan stood up against Israel and incited David to count the people of Israel. So the redactors of 1 Chronicles see the initiation of the census as different than 2 Samuel. We might talk about that, we might not. But it's a curious little thing. Just notice that, sometimes two stories that are so similar can be told differently. Go count the people of Israel. So the king said to Joab and the commanders of the army who were with him, go through all the tribes of Israel from Dan to Beersheba and take a census of the people so that I may know how many there are. But Joab said to the king, may the Lord your God increase the number of the people 100-fold, while the eyes of my lord the king can still see it. But why does my lord the king want to do this? But the king's word prevailed against Joab and the commanders of the army. So Joab and the commanders of the army went out from the presence of the king to take a census of the people of Israel. They crossed the Jordan and began from Aor, from the city to the middle of the valley, towards Gad and on to Jazer. And they came to Gilgal and to Kadesh and the land of the Hittites. They came to Dan, and from Dan they went to Sidon. And they came to the fortress of Tyre and to all the cities of the Hivites and the Canaanites. And they went to the Negeb of Judah and to Beersheba. So when they had gone through all the land, they came back to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. And Joab reported to the king the number of those who had been recorded in Israel were 800,000 soldiers able to draw the sword, and those of Judah were 500,000. But afterward David was stricken to the heart because he had numbered the people. So we're told in 2 Samuel, God's the one who initiated it. We're told in Chronicles it was the adversary, Hasatan, Satan. I have sinned greatly in what I have done. But now, O Lord, I pray you take away the guilt of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. When David rose in the morning, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Gad, David's seer, and said, go and say to David, thus says the Lord, 3 things I offer you. Choose one of them, and I will do it to you. So Gad came to David and told him. He asked, shall 3 years of famine come to you on your land? Or will you flee 3 months before your foes while they pursue, or shall there be 3 days pestilence in your land? Now consider and decide what answer I shall return to the one who sent me. So it seems strange. David feels guilty about it. He inquires of the Lord. The prophet comes and says, you get 3 options. You get 3 years of famine, 3 months of fleeing before your enemies, or 3 days of pestilence. What? Part of it is census was not a good thing, at least in this mindset. Why wouldn't census be a good thing? What do census mean? Taxation. Taking account. But when you take account, what are you going to do with that account? The very thing that 1 Samuel says, what do kings do? They take the best of what you have. How do they know what you have? They do a census. They'll determine what you need and what you don't need, and then they'll take it. They'll take your sons, they'll take your daughters, they'll take your land, they'll take your... And part of it is, and at least in this moment, there's kind of a balance between kingship and the tribes. But once the king becomes bureaucratic in such a way that you do a census, eventually the king becomes in place of God in many ways. Because he's going to be the one that knows everything and determines everything. And for us, it's kind of hard to understand that. We like census. It gives us a lot of ability to navigate things. But from a tribal perspective, one person knowing all this isn't necessarily a good thing. David said to Gad, I am in great distress. Let us fall into the hand of the Lord, for his mercy is great, but let me not fall into human hands. So the Lord sent a pestilence on Israel from morning until the appointed time, and 70,000 of the people died from Dan to Beersheba. But when the angel stretched out his hand toward Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord relented concerning the evil and said to the angel who was bringing destruction among the people, it is enough. Now stay your hand. And the angel of the Lord was then by the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. When David saw the angel was destroying the people, he said to the Lord, I alone have sinned, and I have long done wickedly. But these sheep, why have they done? Let your hand, I pray, be against me and against my father's house. That day Gad came to David and said to him, go up and erect an altar to the Lord at the threshing floor. Following Gad's instructions, David went up as the Lord had commanded. When Ahimelech looked down, he saw the king and his servants coming toward him. He went out and prostrated himself before the king's face to the ground. He said, why has the Lord my king come to his servant? And David said, to buy the threshing floor from you in order to build an altar to the Lord so that the plague may be averted from the people. Then he said to David, let my lord the king take and offer up what seems good to him. Here are the oxen from the burnt offerings, and the threshing sledges, and the yokes of the oxen for the wood. All this, O king, he gives to the king. And Aruah said to the king, may the Lord your God respond favorably to you. And the king said to him, no, but I will buy them from you for a piece. I will not offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God that cost me nothing. So David brought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver. David built there an altar of the Lord, offered burnt offerings and offerings of well-being, so the Lord answered his supplication for the land, and the plague was averted from Israel. Kind of imagine why this was put at the appendix. It would have been hard to tell this story in the midst of all the other stories that David was doing. You know, where does this story go in trying to tell part of us, we think about the biblical narrative, and if you're trying to tell a story that people will remember and be able to retell over and over again, sometimes you got to keep the movement of the story going. And some of these extra stories, they said, well, let's just hold them till the end. Because they just don't fit in the flow. And this is essentially that story. It gets picked up in 1 Chronicles. Go back and read 1 Chronicles if you want to. I want to just kind of offer a few kind of last words as we kind of end today, as we've been with the life of David. I hope that as you've read through, as we've read together, as you've thought about it, that you can imagine the world David lived in a little better. It's not a world we live in. You know, if we were to go in our history and think about, well, what's the closest we could come to in our history in the West? And I would say the closest we could come to our history in the West was probably, for most of us that have English blood. I've got a lot of English blood. It would be the early days of the Angles and the Saxons and the other tribes that were in Great Britain, in Britannia at the time, that were fighting for power for one kingdom, which eventually came. And those were usually warlords. They also had to fight against the Vikings and the Danes and others during that period. And it was messy, it was brutal. And that's essentially kind of what this life would have been like. You know, to have a kingdom, to get to a kingdom, not everybody elects a king. Now this isn't a democracy. You got 12 tribes, and one person is saying that they're going to what? Make decisions for all of them. Some were okay with Saul doing it. A lot were okay with David doing it. But never was there anybody 100% all the way during that period. And David is essentially having to fight the enemies outside and continually to keep his power maintained over and over again. And we see within his own household. So you can imagine, you know, when you read the Psalms, when you read the other places, David, this isn't, you know, we idealize David, and we idealize maybe David's tenure as king, but it was ups and downs. It was a rough life. even by the end, we're going to see the kingship's not given to Solomon all at once. There are others want to be king after David. David's got to make a decision. It doesn't always go well. First time we really get to see Bathsheba talk is in the first couple of chapters, because she wants her son to be king.
So who's king every day?
Solomon becomes king. Well, Solomon becomes king before David does. But not everybody necessarily wants Solomon to be king. And then when Solomon is king, we'll read his kingdom grows, but all of those tribal animosities are still there. And eventually the kingdom divides into two kingdoms. And the rest of the history is one kingdom eventually goes away and another kingdom saved. We have a good king who builds a wall before the Assyrians come, Hezekiah's wall in the southern kingdom. But their sin is just as much as the others, and eventually they go away. And the question is, how did we get here? For us, we've got, a couple of 100 years of history for America, and we're still telling those stories that happened 100 years ago. Imagine Israel in the time of Jesus. This is ancient history. This is as far from us as 800,000 years difference in time. A lot of time has gone by when you talk about the story of David. Ancient history. But those stories are so impactful in their understanding of who they are, where they came from, and the awareness there will be somebody out of David's lineage that's going to come and rule. By the time you get to the time of Jesus, they're still hoping for a Messiah figure. One like David. And Jesus shows up, but he's not like David. And his kingdom's not like David's kingdom. David is both good and bad. He's complicated. He's just as human as we are. But his life is just magnified so much because he's in power. He makes good decisions and wise decisions. He makes bad decisions. And in reality, David is remembered as one of the best kings of Israel. And David's a good king in some ways. But in comparison to Jesus, he is not the same. And we have to understand that. As followers of Jesus, when we look for leadership, we have to understand that the political reality, even a person after God's own heart, if they deal with politics, any sort of politics, ancient, modern, most of them are going to get their hands dirty. So as followers of Jesus, we always have to understand that our King is a King who went to a cross for us. Our King is the one who reaches out to not just those that have, but more likely those that have not. Our King is the one who tries to bring people together, not push them apart. And throughout 1st and 2nd Kings, we'll see a lot of bad kings because they'll lead the people to idolatry. They'll lead them to sin. And over again, God will send now prophets to the people to say, listen, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. And in our day, we have to see these stories and say, how do they apply to us? Where do we look for good leadership that models good qualities? Where do we understand that some things aren't black and white? David's not black and white. He's gray in most every area of his life. And that's where he has to work. I mean, what would it be like to have people that want to kill you all the time, to take your throne? Some people that work maybe in business understand that as a cutthroat society. But I don't feel that way most days. I wouldn't want that pressure. We also see David not getting his hands dirty, but he lets a lot of other people do it for him. David also covers up stuff he does. So these are realities that sometimes we think of as only our modern realities of politicians and senators and presidents, but this has happened all through history. And as people of God, sometimes we just have to live in and amongst it and live the best we can to love God, to love our neighbor as ourselves. Let me close this in prayer. And for those that are online with us, we will not meet again for Bible study until the fall, where we will pick up in 1 Kings. If you would like to come with us to eat, we are going to eat on Monday, June the 2nd. We're going to meet here at 10:30 and go out to eat. So if you've been online with us and want to do some fellowship, we'd love to have you. You feel free to call me and I'll give you more details. Let's pray. Gracious God, we thank you for the day. We thank you for the love and the grace that you show us. God, we thank you for the story of David that we have been in for almost 14 weeks. We thank you for the ability that we have to read this story for ourselves, to share it for ourselves, and to know that this story has shaped and continues to shape people over and over again. God, although we've talked about it as the story of David, it's really your story. How you work in and amongst people. You work in a broken reality of sin. And even in that broken reality, you call people to you to serve, to lead, to guide. God, none of us are perfect. And we've read that David wasn't either. But God, you used him. God, we pray that you'll continue to use us and to call out leaders that will guide others towards you. Lord, be with us over the summer. Keep us safe. We pray for those that can't be with us because of sickness or other issues. And Lord, help us as a church continue to grow together throughout this summer. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen.